all of you wayward spirits. My name is Liz Ashley, and I am so obsessed with supernatural that I decided to do some research Winchester style on anything and everything mentioned in the show. And though the show has sadly ended, this podcast is going to keep the family together. So, what do you say? Do you want to join me on the hunt? This content has a lot of reference to death and disturbing situations, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to season 3, episode 2 of Wayward Spirit Pod, where we are researching Amazons. So today we are specifically talking about the episode. It is the Slice Girls, and it is in season 7, episode 13. It is directed by Jerry Winnick. Winnick? Yes. And and written by Eugene Ross Lemming and Brad Buckner. All right. Sorry if I butchered those names. Side note, I love that they named it Slice Girls because I was obsessed with the Spice Girls movie growing up. Now, if you've never seen it, which you might not have, I might be showing my age right now, but I loved the Spice Girls movie. I was obsessed with it. I had the VHS. Yes, it was a videotape. I had a VHS of the Spice Girls movie, and I loved it so much. Now I really want to watch it. All right. Okay, so this episode starts out with this guy alone in his apartment when all of a sudden somebody walks through the door. He's assuming, I don't know, he's calling someone's name. So assuming it was some woman. And it was not the person he thought it was. And she threw him against the wall and proceeds to cut this like sigil on his body after killing him. She had this knife and she was just slashing everywhere. It was crazy. It was crazy. I always forget that they have the craziest intros. Like I just always forget. I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Now we see Sam and Dean driving down the road, and it's in the Impala, and the Impala scenes are like my comfort scenes. Like, I just love seeing the Impala driving down the road. I don't know what it is, but it just brings me so much comfort and joy. Like, it really does. Also, Sam is driving. Sam is literally driving. Like, what? I love when Sam drives because we never get to see it. So Dean is actually asleep. And so, yeah, this was after Bobby. So he was drinking out of Bobby's flask and fell asleep. So, yeah. Yeah, because this is season 7. I thought that happened like in the end of season 7 or like the beginning of season 8. So I was like, oh, I guess it happened in the early season 7. I didn't realize that. So now they're going to check out that murder because that murder was crazy. So of course they're going to go check it out. And because there were 4 other guys murdered just like him and their hands and their feet were cut off. So I guess that guy's hands and feet were cut off. Well, so this is when Dean like really did not want to go hunting. All he wanted to do was like look for Dick Roman, and Sam eventually talks him into it. But Dean's like skeptical. He's like, "How do you even know it's our thing?" Like da 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 da. But they go to the morgue, and then of course they see the sigil on this guy's like stomach, and Sam knew he was right, and for some reason Dean starts talking to the guy. Like this has nothing to do with anything, but it's just so funny. Dean starts talking to the guy in the morgue, and he starts talking to him about like FBI benefits and like all this kind of stuff. And Dean is like obviously having fun with it, and Sam is just like so over it. He's like, "Oh my gosh, like what are you doing?" It's really funny. But as they're talking to the mortician, this guy says that they found flesh at the crime scene, but it didn't match anything in their database and that it's not even human. So it's not even human. So Sam was right. Like it is totally their thing. And as they're walking out, Dean's like, I guess it's in our ballpark. Like, what? So then Sam's like, yeah, not matching anything human usually seals the deal for me. I agree. Oh my gosh. So Dean decides to go to the bar, and Sam decides to go do some research on this sigil. And at the bar, Dean meets a girl who, if you have seen Vampire Diaries, is Jenna from Vampire Diaries. It took me so long to figure that out. Like, seriously, I started watching Vampire Diaries and I was like, oh, that girl looks so familiar. And I could never quite place it. And then I was like, oh, she was the Amazon girl, right? Oh, sorry. We don't know that yet in the podcast. So Dean and this girl definitely hit it off, and they go back to her house, if you know what I mean. And this is all happening while Shook Me All Night Long is playing. And it's really crazy because she is like uber strong and she is like pushing Dean around. And all while like, okay, so it's this funny dichotomy. There's literally like this like love scene going on. And then there's this other scene where now fifth guy is getting killed. So it goes back and forth and back and forth, and it's just like this weird dichotomy. It's just like, oh, this is strange. But the next day, Dean meets Sam at the new crime scene, hungover and tired from his long night. And when they're at the crime scene, they meet the police officer on the case, and she explains what happened and everything that was going on to them, and basically tells them that it was the same thing that happened to the last few men. And that's when the dead guy's friend comes to the door to find out what happened to his friend because all these police officers are everywhere. And he ended up telling Sam that this guy had a one night stand a couple nights ago and that his wife was like super mad at him and took off, which valid, like totally valid. I would do the same thing. So and this is when Dean realizes that he left Bobby's flask over at Lydia's house. The girl, he just, Jenna, we're going to call her Lydia slash Jenna. I don't want to confuse you, but So Sam makes fun of Dean because he's like, so you know her name and you're actually going to call her? And then he starts to call her and he's like, "Aw, she gave you her number?" So funny. But honestly, like everyone's thinking it, right? Like Sam is just saying what everyone is thinking. But they are so cute. Like I love when they have those like brotherly moments. Like it makes me so happy. I'm like, they're so cute. But when Dean calls, Lydia does not sound happy, like at all. She just says that she hasn't, like, she's like, I haven't seen the flask and I'm busy. And then she hangs up. It's like, yeah, no, I'm busy. Goodbye. That's it. And that is very suspicious. All right. Sam definitely got a kick out of that. Dean did not. Then we see Lydia. So we see Lydia like hang up the phone, right? And then when they like zoom out, you see her with a baby bump. A literal baby bump. Like it's been like a morning. Like it was still the next day. It was the next day. Whew. Then I don't even know when, maybe that night, I think, we literally see her giving birth around all of these other like women in a ceremony type thing. Like literally, it was like hours, maybe. I don't even know. Okay, so she's like literally having a baby, right? And she is in pain. And this lady, like the leader of the Amazons, I'm like assuming, she's like, control your pain. This pain is an honor. Girl, I no. Like if that were me, I'd be like, excuse me. Like, and just think of it. Just think of it. I know this is all hypothetical, but if if do you think it would hurt more or hurt less? Like if you like I feel like it would hurt less if you like got pregnant the next day, had the baby like literally like that night. Like I feel like that would hurt a little bit more than maybe like a regular baby. And so and plus they're really strong. So I feel like that's got to hurt like a lot more than normal, which I mean I've heard it hurts just as much normal. I don't know. But but I feel like if I were in that situation and someone told me to control my pain and that the pain was an honor, then I'd like slap them. Okay. Like literally. So then the baby comes out and Lydia, like, she's not phased though. So she doesn't seem like it's like afterwards, she doesn't seem like she's in pain. She's like totally not phased. And then she's like, what will we call her? So strange. And she says, you will call her Emma. Weird. And then she says next. She literally says next. So there are like others doing this and going through this. There are more than one. So Sam was not able to figure out that sigil. So now we see him talking with a professor to see if he may know what the sigil is. But it's so funny. This guy's like so stingy with the information. He's like, they're like, okay, can you find out what this sigil is for me? And he's like, oh well, it's ancient. And they're like, yeah, thank you. Like, yes, we know. And and he's like, well, because he thinks they're FBI. So he's like, well, if I'm gonna do this, he's like, I need a green card for my maid. What? Oh my gosh, it's wild. And I think they agree. I don't know. They don't really tell you. I think they agree. But because I mean, this guy, I think, ultimately does research for them, but I just think it's so funny. It's just so funny. So then it gets really sad because, they wish that they could just ask Bobby and they just want to call Bobby, and it's just really sad. And so Dean gets upset, and then he gets upset like because she hasn't called him back because he wants Bobby's flask. But Sam, of course, is like, oh, so now a girl is finally dumping you. And then as Dean leaves to go get the flask, he's like, you're enjoying this too much. They're so cute. But Dean goes to Lydia's house, and when she answers the door, she calls him Dawn, which is so funny. I put that in the TikTok for like it was like funny moments of season 3. This is season 3. Funny moments we're gonna talk about in season 3, and that was one of them. Very funny. She didn't even remember his name. She called him Dawn, and he's like, Dean. Dean is like I think Dean is like so amazed that this is happening to him. He's like, what is going on? And he's like, I guess you never got my messages. And she was like, no, I did. I've just been busy. Which I think is so funny because she just said it like so nonchalantly, like just so like matter of fact, like, yeah, no, I did, just busy, like, leave me alone. I love it. So he tries to explain to her, like, I need this flask back. Like, it was an old friend's and it's really important. And so she's like, okay, yeah, I just found it. And so she went to go get it for him, and he walks inside, and then there's the baby. And he's like, "Oh, you're babysitting. I get it. That's why you've been busy." And she's like, "Yeah, no." And he was like, "You didn't tell me you had a little girl." And she's like a toddler. She is like literally a toddler now. Like the day before she was a baby, and now she's like literally a toddler. It's wild. And then this is my favorite part of the whole entire episode. Like literally this one line just it's the best. It's the best line of the whole entire thing. So then he says, "I hear they grow like weeds." And she says, "You have no idea." He really does not. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. So funny. Just so then Dean walks out of the room because Sam is calling him and is like wondering where he's at. And then Dean hears the baby talking. Like he literally hears the baby. Like, let me remind you, this baby was a toddler. And now she can like form sentences. It's wild. And he is like freaking out because the baby said, "Who is that guy?" And she's like, "We'll discuss it later." Excuse me. We'll discuss it later. Like, oh my gosh. I just this whole episode is just so funny to me. It's just so funny. Then we see Sam at the morgue again, only the police officer is there, and she is not too fond of the FBI lurking around. Like, she's not very nice at all. Like, she's actually really rude, like, extremely rude. But as he's at the morgue and he's talking to the mortician, Sam realizes that all of the men that were murdered went to the Colbert room, which is the same bar that Dean met Lydia at, which is not a coincidence. That is when we see the group leader of the Amazons go to Lydia's house while Dean is staking them out. Which is so funny. And Sam calls Dean because, of course, he didn't show to the morgue. And so he starts telling Sam why. He's like, "Look, like this girl literally had a baby and she literally like grew overnight and I have no idea what's going on." And she was speaking full sentences. Of course, Sam is like not amused and like is like, "What are you talking about?" And but Sam tells him about the Colbert room, and it's like, okay, they're not putting two and two together yet. And now when Emma goes with the leader, she's like going with the leader, and she's like about 5 or 6. And yes, this is in the matter of like hours. So Dean, after the leader and Emma drive off, Dean goes back to the house that they're squatting in and tells Sam about everything. And Sam like doesn't believe him. And the way he describes it, this is the way he describes it. He said, "And by sunset, she's Hannah Montana, early years." Oh my gosh. So then we see Emma, and she is at this creepy ceremony where they're eating like this piece of meat, and I'm pretty sure that it's from one of the men. Pretty sure. And while they're eating this and having this ceremony, the leader is like almost like preaching to them and saying that they kill for their goddess, and that I guess like killing for their goddess is a symbol of blood unity and grows the tribe. So then that professor that Sam called found something, so they go to talk to him, and he says that the sigil is one of the god Harmonia. And according to the myth, Harmonia and Ares, the god of war, produced the Amazons. And Dean said, like Wonder Woman, which I have not seen any of the movies. I know, I'm sorry. But I'm pretty sure that's what she's like modeled after. But the professor is like, no, they were a tribe of warriors and they actually existed in that comic book as a silly provision. Oh, poor Dean. But the professor thinks that the sigil originated with the Amazons to pay homage to Harmonia. He also said that their tribe was exclusively female and that they had no use for men whatsoever except to reproduce. And this tribe, after they got pregnant, killed the male by cutting off their body parts. Yup. Sound familiar? I'm pretty sure it does. Oh, then we see the female police officer, and she is on the phone telling someone that she is looking into Sam and Dean and that their credentials are fake. Yes, they are. And she can't do a background check. And she, as they show you the other person on the line, it is the freaking Amazon leader. So this police officer is an Amazon, and like they know that Sam and Dean are hunters and that they're out for them. And yeah. But I think also, side note, something really funny. She mentions like when she like when she's trying to tell the Amazon leader who they are, she was like, do you remember those two brothers who went on a cross country murder spree? That is one of my favorite parts of this show. Like the fact I'm sorry. I'm gonna cry. This is so funny to me. The fact that they went on a cross country murder spree. Like, I know it wasn't them and it was the Leviathan them, but the fact that like people think that they are serial killers is just so funny to me because they like pop it in there every so often, you know? Like they don't remind you very often, but when they do, it's so funny. And you're like, oh yeah. It's just so funny. And then the Amazon leader says that the one is already scheduled to be taken care of, which is Dean. And then she says that they will simply add the other one to the agenda. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Then we see Sam, and he is talking about how he found this crazy side to the lore that the professor didn't mention. And Dean was like, yeah, of course. Like, the professor he didn't believe in the lore side. Like, he knew, like, history that they were real, but he didn't believe in, like, the lore side. And so he's like, of course, they didn't believe it. But Sam tells him that they had this long, bloody war and they almost went extinct. Like they almost went extinct because of this war. So they made a deal with the god Harmonia to make them stronger and to replenish their tribe. And he can't even find a way to kill them, but even worse. He like he doesn't want to prove Dean right, but he's like you know, like unwanting to say this, but he says he's like they tend to reproduce quickly after mating and they give birth within like 36 hours, and that the babies grow incredibly fast and that the aging process becomes normal like at like when they're a teenager at like 15 or 16 to grow their army. And now like as Dean is like catching on to what he's saying, his face is like visibly and like completely concerned. He like his face is like dumbfounded. He's like, no, like please don't say this right now. So then Sam says that their mating cycle is 2 years and that they send out all of the women of childbearing age. So yeah, when she said next, I guess there were like a line of women that were giving birth to Amazon babies, which is really wow. So that is when Sam's like, maybe you're like, he's like, maybe you're, and then Dean's like, no, don't you say it. Don't you say it. And he's like, look, if the kid is yours, and Dean cuts him off again. He's like, don't say it. Do not say it. Oh man, I'm surprised this is the first time this has happened to Dean. Also, I totally think Ben is his child, but that has nothing to do with this. Anyway, so now we see them having like another ceremony thing, and they're literally like branding their wrists. And and as they're branding their wrists, the leader is saying, so now they will learn how to take pain and then learn how to inflict. Like, what? That is freaking creepy. Like, creepy. That is creepy. Okay. Then Sam barges into the professor's office, and the professor is like, what now? Like, how many times do I have to see you? It's so funny. But of course, Dean did not go with Sam to see the professor. And so while Sam is at the professor's office, Dean is at the house that they're squatting at. And this girl is like, she knocks on the door, and it's like the girl, like it's Emma. And she says that she's in trouble and that Dean is the only person she can trust because he's her father. So she just came out and said it. He is her father. Wild. And she says that they have been watching him ever since they got Lydia pregnant. So wow, that's a couple days. All right. Now, okay, so now Emma is saying that she doesn't want to be like them, and that they torture her and like etc etc, which I mean they did, but I don't believe her. Like I don't trust her. All right. If you watch my Walker reviews, you know that I don't trust anyone. I trust no new character. All right. So So, of course, Dean lets her in and she asks him to get her away from the Amazons, and that she just wants to get away, and that she knows that he's a hunter so that he doesn't want her. And, she's really laying it on thick there. She's like, I know you don't want me. Like, okay, girl, I see you. And he's like, like this isn't a normal situation. And she's like, how would I know? I've only been alive for 3 days, which, okay, valid. Like that made me feel bad for her. But then we see Sam again. And when he went to the professor's office, he brought this paper that Bobby has, and it's in Greek. And so he needed him to translate it. And he's like, oh my God. Like, as he's translating it, the professor's like, oh my gosh, what is it with you and Amazons? It's really funny. And then he says that this lore repeats the conventional lore, but in this tribe, the ritual of initiation is the child killing their father. Ha ha! See? Emma is not to be trusted. Emma is not to be trusted. So as Sam is leaving the professor's office to warn Dean, he runs into the police officer, the Amazon police officer, and he sees that, like, as like they're talking, he sees that she has the brand on her wrist. So now he officially knows that she's an Amazon. But as she's like walking up to him, she calls him Sam, and her eyes get like uber red. And I mean, it is like scary red. And she pushes him like down the stairs, but Sam shoots her. Sam was able to shoot her. He like fell, but he was able to shoot her. So she died. And which is funny because he like couldn't find lore on how to kill them, and he killed her. So I wonder if it was silver bullets. I'm guessing it had to be. I'm not sure. I don't know. So now we see Dean again, and at first he's like agreeing with her, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll help you." Da da da. But then he goes in the refrigerator, and as he turns his back, Emma like pulls out this knife, And Dean, with like the fastest reflexes I have ever seen in my life, turns around and pulls his gun on her. And like, let me tell you, his reflexes were like on point, which I mean, I guess, of course, but it was just funny. I was like, oh my gosh, that was so fast. So now Sam is driving like crazy to get to Dean, but Dean's actually okay because turns out he never believed her, which I'm glad. Very transparent. And she's like, then why didn't you kill me before? And she's like, it's weirdly hard, huh? And that is like, I like, that's the weirdest part of this episode, I think, is that it's weird thinking about Dean having like a kid. Like, it's already weird. Well, I guess it's not weird to think about him and Ben. I don't know. Like, it is, it isn't, kind of. But like, Ben is, I think Ben's a little bit different. Like thinking that Dean has like a monster kid. It's just wild. And so I think it's just weird. It's so weird. But Sam is actually outside the door and Dean is like trying his hardest to get Emma to walk away and it's like you can really leave if you want, like go ahead. But Sam comes in and shoots her because she was not gonna leave. She kept saying, I can't, I can't, I can't, which is so sad. Oh, and it's so sad because Dean really does look like conflicted. Like at the end, when he sees her dead, like he just looks so conflicted, and it's really sad. It's like pretty sad. And yeah, it is. So now Sam and Dean go to the Amazon headquarters to like go get the mothership. That's what Dean calls it. But they were gone. So they skipped town, which was probably pretty smart. And they left. They were gone. And then it ends with Sam driving again. Oh, so cute. And they are not happy though. Like they are not happy that the Amazons got away. And Sam was mad because he hesitated. Like he was mad at Dean for hesitating and not killing her. And he was like, well, she was mine, which is so like it's a little heart-wrenching, because I feel like Dean just really wanted a family and like even though it wasn't conventional, like I think he still like cared. And so it's really actually pretty sad. Like it's actually pretty sad. All right. So now we are going to talk about the lore that we see in this episode. So, this episode, of course, is about the Amazons, and they killed people by cutting off their hands and their feet. And it was just the men that they killed, and it was the men that impregnated the women. But they had no need for men because they were an all women tribe, except for procreation. But then they kill them afterwards, which I don't really understand. I guess yeah, it's their initiation into their tribe. Messed up initiation. Only in this tribe, it is the kids. But we also learned that they are an actual ancient tribe, like they really existed in history. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit more in the lore. So, yeah, well, I think that's it. Oh, that is not it. They literally give birth in 36 hours, and then the baby become teenagers in like hours, and then they kill their dads, and then they're a part of the tribe, and they they start actually aging. Wild, crazy. This is some crazy lore. Like I've never considered this like one of my this has never been one of my more favorite episodes to rewatch. Like I don't know. It's just never been my episode. But and it's not bad. It's a good episode. I just never it was never like the one that I'd be like, "Oh, yes, love it." But it's actually really fun to rewatch and the lore is actually really freaking cool and interesting. So, yeah. Oh yeah, and they also worshipped the god Harmonia, and that is who they did the deal with to stay alive, not go extinct. Yes. All right. Hey, Wayward Spirits. Do you love Supernatural? Can you quote basically every single episode? Do you know how to hunt all of the monsters? Well, I'm guessing if you're listening to this podcast, the answer is yes. And that means that you are basically a Winchester and need my new merch. Wayward Spirit Pod officially has merch, and the first two collections are Mentally Dating a Winchester and Basically a Winchester. We also have some really cool stickers representing Sam as Moose, Dean as Squirrel, Cass's Wings, and Baby going down the road so far. Go to waywardspiritpod.com/shop to get your very own. And when you do, because I really hope that you do, take a picture and tag me in it because I would love to see you in our designs. Well, all right, let's get back to the episode. Now, let's talk about the real life lore on Amazons. Yay! Okay, so like I said, Amazons were actually a real, like they were real, they were a real tribe. But so some historians for a very, very long time believed that they were purely imaginary. They thought that they were these mythical warriors who would have to like Hercules and every Greek hero had to go through some like warrior queen and had to fight this like powerful warrior queen. And so all of these historians just think that they're mythical and that they're not real. But archaeology has actually proven that there really were women fitting the descriptions of these Greek goddesses of Amazons and warrior women, which I think is pretty freaking cool. I had no idea that they were real going into this. This was all new to me going into this. Like, I had no preconceived notion of the Amazons, only what I've seen on Supernatural. So I think it's pretty freaking cool that I love when this kind of stuff happens. Like I love when they're like, "Oh, they thought this didn't exist and now they're finding that it does." I'm like, "Ha ha ha, I'm not crazy," because I feel like I'm sitting here, telling all of you like, I think these exist. I think that exists. I think this story could be true. And it's like sometimes these things, I mean, sometimes there are things that are true. And just because it was a mythical whatever legend does not mean that it's not rooted in truth. So there you go. All right. So but archaeologists are actually proving it, even though some historians still argue that they are not real, which boo to them. You know what? Come on. Let's all believe in some magic. Like, why not? It's fun. Okay. So, the way that they have proven this is that they've actually found thousands of graves of people called Scythians, which are what the Greeks called them. And they're actually people who were women who fought and hunted and rode horses and used bows and arrows and just did everything that the men did, which back then was not a thing. And so they're literally like proving that yes, these warrior women did exist and they were there. And hell yeah. So this gives proof to the warrior woman Amazon that we hear all these stories about. And these same people, these Scythians, they all like were in a small tribe and they all contributed, kind of like in Supernatural. And how they know that these women actually, had bows and arrows and used knives and like, did all the warrior things that the men were doing is when they dug up these graves, they were actually found. They were buried with like knives and bows and arrows and all kinds of things, and they had like the same wounds as the men, which I guess, I mean, I feel like that's so long ago. I wonder how they were able to figure that out. That's actually really interesting. I mean, if the bones are that old, I wonder how they were able to decipher that. So, this fits the description of the ancient Amazons, which is really cool. And it's really cool that they found that. And it's really cool that they existed. And I love that they were warrior women. Like, yes. And something funny is that they actually don't really know like why everyone calls them Amazons, and they don't really know why it's come about. But the lore, like one of the parts, like a part of the lore that people have like stuck onto, where they got this from, is that is that they only had like one breast, so they could easily fire an arrow or hurl a spear. So they thought that these Amazon women only had one breast because they thought that Amazon, like Amazons in Greek, meant no, with like without breast. But apparently that's not true, and that a Greek historian, Helicanos, in the 5th century BC made it up. So yeah. So they don't really know why they're called Amazons, which is actually kind of funny. And one of the discoveries in Russia actually marked the first time that they found like a tribe of these women buried together. Sound familiar? And so the tribe, it was like the youngest were like 12 or 13, and then there were older ones like in their 20s, and then the rest of them were 40 and 50. So, all the little age ranges, which is really funny because it's actually kind of the age ranges of all. It was like the leaders, which were like the like 45 to 50, and then the childbearing age, which were like the 20s, and then the babies, which were like 15 and 16, were teenagers, which is really funny. So apparently, they found that the young girls were trained early on, just like the boys, to, ride horses and use bow and arrows and like be warriors. And I love them. I love them. Yes. This is amazing. I love this. This is great. And they also found that the moms, like the women in the tribe that had kids, were still out there fighting. And so that kind of breaks the notion that they wouldn't go out there because they had kids. But no, like everyone was fighting. And they said it's because they were in these small tribes, and that every person needed to defend their tribe if it came to it. And I just love that because that is exactly like the Amazon tribe and Supernatural. Like literally, here's a few little like lore pieces that are said to try to explain why the tribe was all women. So the first like story or myth was that the Amazons, when they mated with men, that they just kept resulting in female children, and they weren't like their husbands or anything. They were just like mating with men and like random men, I guess. And I feel bad saying that, but it is kind of like Supernatural. And they kept the girl kids and they gave all of the boy kids to their fathers, and like they just went and left with them. Savage. So, part of the lore that has to do with the Greek mythology part of the lore is that the Greek hero Hercules. I was just talking about that. I think in the last episode, which is actually really funny, was leading an expedition to obtain the girdle of Hippolyte. Is that what he was doing in the movie? I really don't remember. And to get this, he had to conquer the queen of the Amazons and her tribe. So there's that like lore where a Greek hero had to like conquer an Amazon to get what he needed. And then another hero story of a hero having to go through an Amazon queen is the 16th century Spanish explorer Francesco de Orellana, sorry if I butchered that, he claimed to have fought a woman he said was like an Amazon queen on what was previously known as the Marion River, but because he won and conquered, he named it the Amazon River because he had to fight an Amazon queen. So, according to the Greek mythology lore, Amazons are portrayed in many different ancient Greek epic poems and legends. They are in Hercules, like we said. They are in the Iliad, which was by Homer. Yes. So of course they were female warriors and hunters, and which we know, and they were real in real life. But in the Greek mythology, their society was closed for men. There were no men allowed, and they only raised daughters, which in this, they either kill the sons or return them to their fathers, like we talked about. And they would only socialize with the men briefly to reproduce. So these Amazon women, they had queens that commanded their tribe, which was like similar to like a military, and they were in places in the world like Cynthia, haha, which I'm totally probably butchering it. But like we were saying, the Scythians, that's who they found buried. So yes, there is like a lot of truth to this freaking Greek mythology, which makes you wonder, doesn't it? Yes, yes, it does. And it makes me wonder. Okay, and according to the myth, okay. And according to the myth, Otera was the first Amazon queen, and she was the offspring of a romance between Ares, the god of war, and the nymph Harmonia of the Acemonian wood, and is a demigod. Ha ha! There we go. There we go. All right. So now let's talk about the similarities and differences, which there are not many. There are tons of similarities though. Like well, for the most part, like historically, they did have, like, there were men within the tribe, like there were other men buried with some of the other ones. So I don't know. I mean, there was that one burial that just had women, so that could have been a tribe. But as far as we know, like one of the differences historically is that they're not an all women tribe, but in the mythology, they are definitely an all women tribe. And they only keep the girls, which in Supernatural, they didn't really tell you. They kind of just had girls. They didn't tell you what was going to happen if they had a boy. But in the mythology, they kill them, which is wild. Or they let the father have them, which I think is a better solution. But but yeah, the mythology is essentially the same. Like the god, well, no, see, the god Harmonia, they didn't say that like the god Harmonia like saved them. The god Harmonia and Ares, they produced the first Amazon queen. And so I'm guessing that like leader, that like lady from the show, she was an Amazon queen, like the leader lady. That's what she was. She was an Amazon queen. All right. But yeah, like the mythology is the same. Basically, like history is pretty much the same. The only thing different is in Supernatural is that they kill the men and then cut off their limbs and carve a sigil into their chest, which I did not see any of that in my research. So that's good, I guess. That's a good difference to have. Of course, Supernatural's gonna have the gorier story. Oh man, that was fun. That was so fun. Oh, Amazons are so much interesting than I thought they would be. And it's so cool that they're actually real. Like that's really cool. I think that's really awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much to all of my fellow Wayward Spirits for joining me on this journey today. And if you want to go on more hunts with me, make sure to subscribe to Wayward Spirit Pod wherever you listen to podcasts or now on YouTube. And next week, join me while we hunt haunted dolls and so much more with the Real Scary Pod. Oh my gosh, this episode was so much fun to film. It was literally so much fun. I am so excited for this episode. But if you are already wanting more Wayward Spirit Pod, there is some extra content on Patreon. I have behind the scenes, I have the visual episodes from season 1 and 2 of Wayward Spirit Pod and some bloopers. So go check that out on Patreon at Wayward Spirit. And I would love to put together some listener stories and responses to the episodes. So if you want to tell me what you think about Amazons or have a supernatural story of your own, send me a text file, an audio file, a video file, whatever you are comfortable with, to waywardspiritpod@gmail.com so I can get those on the podcast. I would love to hear what you think. And if you want even more Wayward Spirit, check us out on Instagram at Wayward Spirit Pod and at Wayward Spirit TV. And check us out on Patreon at Wayward Spirit. And of course on YouTube at Wayward Spirit TV. All right. Well, thank you so much. I will see all of you Wayward Spirits next week. And don't forget to stay spooky.